Hey guys, welcome on into Athletes Unplugged. I'm Julie Stewart-Binks, and it has been an emotional couple weeks, to say the least, in the wake of the murder of George Floyd and the numerous powerful protests that have gone on across the country in the face of racial inequality, injustice, oppression, and the support for the Black Lives Matters movement. This week, we wanted to keep the conversation going with a very special member of our AU community. She is a professional softball player, two-time All-American, national championship winner with the Florida Gators in 2015, member of the Puerto Rican national team, Aleshia Ocasio. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you so much, Julie, for having me on Athletes Unplugged.
Yeah, I mean, it's been an emotional time, as we said, and a lot has gone on in the world. And for you, what has the experience been like, even just as things have happened in the last couple weeks?
I think that this is a hard time for everybody, especially the Black community. So it weighs heavy on my heart. It is something that has, been around for countless years. The death of, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and all the others who have been, victimized by police brutality and have died because of it. This isn't the first, the second, the third, and unfortunately, I don't know that will be the last. But this weighs heavy on my heart. As a member of the Black community, so I've been just doing my part and trying to have the tough conversations and spreading my knowledge throughout the community.
You mentioned having conversations, and that is such a big part of sort of the education. And now, we're feeling the movement, we're feeling this energy of everyone has to be a part and everyone has to feel some kind of onus to make change. And for you, what have those conversations been like?
I think the first part is acknowledgement, whether it be with you as a white counterpart or with somebody who is of the same color as me. Acknowledgement and acknowledging that this does affect them. As somebody who is privileged, the system works in their favor, and that's just a systematic, that's systemic racism. I apologize. But those conversations are tough because, they cause a stress reaction. Not everybody wants to have those tough conversations, but I think in educating people and allowing them to see that this is a part of our history and this is still active in our system today.
Yeah, definitely. And you're taking obviously an active role in this regard. And I read a interview with you in the Chicago Tribune from many years ago that was you wanted your role in your journey in softball to be so much more than just what you're doing with playing, and having young women and young girls look up to you and say, hey, I see someone that looks like me that's doing this. Now, in the certain environment we're in, how much more gravity does sort of your journey feel like it has?
So the article that is online for the Chicago Tribune, I spoke about being a community member in the LGBTQ world and also being a Black woman. So for me, being on a platform where I am visible and I am playing professional softball, I feel like it's my duty to be a voice for people who might not necessarily have one, and present the facts and present my opinions toward them. Because, having somebody to look up to who looks like me and who they can feel they can relate to is really important. So I just want to be able to, be somebody that people look to in our community and be, like I said, the voice for the voiceless.
And we've been talking about racial inequality, but you also mentioned the LGBTQ community. In terms of softball, how do you feel it is in terms of inclusiveness?
I feel in the softball community, you look at the stereotypes, you look at, everybody is gay or is perceived to be gay. And while that's not always the case, we are very widely represented in the LGBTQ community, and that's something that I am proud of. So I feel like I'm able to be myself and to feel comfortable around others, whether they are part of the community or not. But I feel like we are very widely representative, and that is something that represented, and I feel like I am extremely proud to be, one of many. But we dedicate games to LGBTQ community. We have pride games. So I feel like we do our job in making sure that everybody feels welcome and appreciated and accepted.
Do you feel that that is the same as it pertains to race?
So I don't necessarily feel like people have been put in the position to be pushed in order to make it all inclusive. And I mean, you know, growing up as a softball player of color, you have one or two athletes that are colored on your team. And I can attest to that from traveling from Florida all the way to California, and seeing, you know, a multitude of softball teams. Growing up, you know, I have had to be something. I've had to contribute and kind of be at the next level in order to equal my white counterparts. I've actually had people come up to my dad. My dad is a light Puerto Rican man, and multiple people have asked him, is your daughter adopted? Your daughter must play this position because of the color of her skin. And there's just a lot of assumptions around the fact that our skin color is different. We have to be the fastest on the team. We have to be the dancers on the team. So even last week, my pro team, we weren't issuing a statement, and I asked if we were going to, and the initial answer was no. And I had multiple conversations with people in power, who kind of govern the team, and me pushing and asking for that. I feel like that's something that I shouldn't have to ask for. If I break my back for you, and if I am you know, on the field working for you, for our team, for our organization, for our brand, why should I have to ask for a statement, which is so little compared to everything else that is going on? Why can't you denounce racism for me as a Black athlete and one of many who have passed through the organization? So that's just one way that I feel like I haven't been accepted in my community on a specific team. It wasn't till I spoke to, you know, the mayor. I talked to the mayor because I was going to issue my own statement, explaining my narrative and the conversation that I had. It felt like I was, you know what I mean? It was just a really weird conversation. Like, things were said, like, you know, we're a softball team, so we post softball things. And for me, like, you're doing a disservice. Like, as an athlete in the softball community, I'm going to voice my voice. And it's not necessarily about politics or this or that. It's really just about human rights and equality and equity, and just, you know, announcing to the world that you denounce racism, and that we all stand in solidarity to combat this systemic racism, and even like interpersonal or internalized racism. We don't stand with it. And I feel like that's just something so simple. I'm sure that there's plenty of people who have dealt with things like that, and it doesn't have to be just a little statement, but, you know, microaggressions, something else that I've experienced. In college, I was getting ready to take some reps on the field, just practice, and I swatted a fly on my face. If anybody knows me, they know I'm afraid of anything that flies, crawls, whatever. But I swatted a fly on my face, and somebody on the field asked if I saw a cop. And so it's just little things like that we kind of have to unlearn.
Huge steps even for you when you do that. I'm sure there's maybe other people who aren't as strong-willed as you are that felt the same way. So, you know, your efforts are already being seen by letting people know that, like, this, if you're staying silent, you know, it's not enough. And on that point, your fiance Natasha Cloud had a very strong statement in the Players Tribune, and if you're silent, I don't with you, period, which has become, you know, a great shareable meme. I've seen it all over Instagram. Some of my friends have been sharing it as well. And for Natasha, she plays for the Washington Mystics, 2019 WNBA champions. When you guys are together and you both play in these two different sports, what have you noticed maybe have been similarities and differences as it pertains to racism, to equality, to justice?
I'm in my sunroom now, and whenever we do stuff like this, you know, both of us are in here, you know, doing interviews, on calls. So it's kind of our workspace. And so I've had the chance to hear her, aside from the multiple conversations that we've had about this, just talk about how her league is 80% Black people. So she, growing up in a game where the culture is derived from people of color, she hasn't experienced as much racism, as many microaggressions, as many like interpersonal, like racist communication. Her league is very supportive of the issues that are at hand, the current events. They're very adamant about making their voices heard, especially Natasha. But I've just seen so much support from her league. They back their players. They have fought to receive that support too. She tells me about, in 2016 when the Black Lives Matter movement first, came about, they got fined for wearing the black t-shirts. It wasn't until they received backlash when they took the fines away and allowed them to wear the inside out black shirts. So they fought for what they have as well, but I just feel like they're just so supportive in each other because they're all, this group of colored women who stand by each other and stand in solidarity and are so cohesive in everything that they do. So I don't necessarily see that with women in softball. Black women are the minority in our sport, and that's a fact. I mean, so I took it upon myself to bring some powerful women of color together, and we actually have a Zoom meeting tonight to kind of speak about what we can do and make softball more inclusive.
That's so good to hear. And you mentioned that in the interviews I had with Kelsey Stewart and AJ Andrews, they were saying there's just so few black women in softball that it. And they said, they brought up this idea that you're supported on the field, but not necessarily supported off the field by your teammates. And I then interviewed Damian Woody, ESPN NFL analyst, who was like, yeah, especially in NFL, and we've seen that play out with Drew Brees' first statements and second statements and then apology. But the idea that like these people can see you every day and want you to bring 100% to the field and all these things, but then you leave and it's like you go back to all these very tribal different ways of thinking and political views and races, and that's not okay, right? And so it's I assume just at least hearing from some people, it's kind of trying to educate so many of these people when they have these experiences to change their daily lives in that regard.
I agree, and it happens far too often, a lot more than people realize. And that's when I, go back to the internalized, like overt racism. It's not always something that's going to be blatant. It's not always something that's going to be in your face, but it is when you make, small comments and when you don't back us up off the field, when we're giving you 100%. And I think that was clear in my story about when I asked for a simple statement and I was told no.
It's ridiculous. When you and Natasha are home together, because obviously you're in quarantine too right now, and which is a whole other ball game with what's going on right now. What kind of like conversations have you guys had that have maybe you found maybe powerful or different or sort of that have been memorable as it pertains to moving the conversation forward, racial inequality in sports and in America?
We have conversations every day. This is something that doesn't sleep. I actually, right before this interview, she was still upstairs sleeping. I called her on FaceTime because I was about to start with you. And I was like, I think I want to start a nonprofit. Being in poverty has a direct correlation to, young athletes not participating in team sports. So I just, being alone with my thoughts, I just thought, softball is very, you're going to find colored women few and far between. So I think that infiltrating those lower economic communities and giving them resources and giving them equipment, because equipment is not cheap. My bat's about $300. My glove is $300. You have a helmet, you have cleats, you have softball pants, you have just so many different pieces of equipment that you need in order to play our sport. I think that, giving these lower economic communities resources and equipment will, and this is something that's not going to happen tomorrow, but later down the line, hopefully we will see more, colored people playing the game of softball.
That's huge. I mean, that's such a great idea too, that you can tangibly create this idea and get resources and funding from so many different people to make change for the future as it pertains to your sport, which clearly has issues right now. I mean, everywhere nowhere is perfect, but softball seemingly has a long way to go to become understanding of this issue. Now, just taking things a little bit differently, you're part of Athletes Unlimited, and we're all trying to figure out what the future looks like with coronavirus and quarantine and all that. But I read somewhere that you were kind of skeptical of it at first, which is, unsurprising. It is something very new. But what was something that made you say, hey, this is a place I want to be a part of?
Yeah, yes, I was skeptical because you look at the dynamics of it. You have teams changing every single week. I mean, you look at team sports and that's just not normal. So for teams to change every week, to go off of a leaderboard and different stats and different things like that, I kind of want to be a part of the launching of this new league and be a part of history, because I do think that this will blow up. It's going to be different, but in a good way. But I'm excited to be a part of it.
What is Natasha's view from being in a women's pro league that has the backing of the NBA? Like, what are her sort of thoughts on when she sees like a league like this and you guys talk about it?
Her viewpoint is to, just be vocal and you closed mouths don't get fed. So I've taken that as inspiration. And with her being so active in her community and on her team, I found that, I kind of gravitate, to her words of giving me advice and telling me the steps that she took in order to be kind of, a team representative and somebody that her team looks up to. She actually told me last night, like, she's a player rep for her union. She told me that, maybe her first or second year, she was kind of just pushed into it. Somebody just called her name and said, Natasha should do this. And she was kind of just, it fell in her lap, but now she's really active in it. And she's, over here the other night calling every single one of her teammates to get their thoughts and how they feel about what's going on in the league. So it's just little things like that drive me to, be more of a leader and take that stance and be more vocal and understanding and relate to people. So I think she's inspired me in that way.
Wow, yeah, a very empowering household there. You guys doing so much in both of your respective sports and in your respective careers. And as we finish up, from your vantage point, like what's one piece of advice or one like message that you want people who are watching this to understand about what we need to do to be better? Maybe if it's in whatever it is in the US, in softball, what would you say?
My message to people would be to stay active in learning. This is a time where we need everybody the most to be in solidarity and to unite. We need our allies. We need our sisters and brothers of color to come together and understand that this isn't going to happen overnight. This is something that we have to actively be doing and be conscious of. So I challenge everybody to pick up a book, to watch a show, to go online and do some research, whatever you feel best with, but just actively learn and figure out ways to open your heart so that you can unlearn some things that have been embedded in us as well.
I mean, I have to thank you so much, Aleshia, for talking with us here today, and I look forward to watching you play. It will be different, that is for sure.
Absolutely, and I want to thank you for allowing me to use my voice on this platform, and I appreciate your words, and hopefully we can all just unite and be in solidarity to combat the oppression that's going on in our systems.